Welcome to iLead Podcast, where you're going to be empowered to learn how to lead in any room you find yourself in. iLead is going to develop and teach you how to lead yourself, problem solve, build a winning team, enrich relationships, and get back into the leadership arena when challenges get you down. Now, let's get ready to lead in any room you find yourself in.
In this episode, I'm sitting down with pastor and iLead Enterprises CEO, Bishop Geoffrey Dudley, to talk about crucifying scale. In our conversation, Bishop Dudley shares about his personal journey from preaching at an early age to Air Force chaplaincy to pastoring a thriving church. His story reveals why it's important to measure success beyond just numbers and highlights how surrendering our scale and growth goals is a requirement for leading people through storms. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Let's get started. Bishop Dudley, welcome to our show today.
Well, Nicole, thank you for having me, and I'm so excited to be here on the podcast and just seeing how I am a disruptor. I got to figure that out.
Well, the good thing is there is no one way to be disruptive. So We'll just, we'll talk about it all. But we have to start with O'Fallon, which is not St. Louis.
No, it is a bedroom community. It's a bedroom community in the suburbs of St. Louis on the Illinois side of the river. For the geography lesson for today, the river Mississippi runs down the middle of the country, and St. Louis is on the Missouri side. And then on the Illinois side of the river is the Metropolitan East, is what we call it, Metro East. And my church is in O'Fallon, Illinois, on the east side. There is another O'Fallon. We will never get those two confused.
Today was the first day I'd ever even learned of O'Fallon. I feel enlightened. Thank you for your ministry in that sacred space.
Yes. And we claim St. Louis as well. I mean, really, we are 15 minutes away. I can see the arch.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. So we are talking today about scale. Now, I have defined scale in the simplest of terms as increasing our impact or our outputs while decreasing or at least stabilizing our costs. And the idea is that scale is something that it seems every leader wants to see. Everybody wants exponential impact. Everyone wants to see exponential growth. But I'm just wondering, is that a biblical premise? And if it is, where do we see it? And if it's not, then how do we know?
What are we scaling?
Yes.
That would be the beginning of that. Mm-hmm. And it is a biblical principle. I mean, he would not have given us the book of Numbers if he wasn't into scale. Okay. And he would not have told Noah to count them 2 by 2 if he wasn't into scale. And the gospel writers would not have said it was 5,000 and then the women and children if it wasn't about scale. So it is biblical. But then what are we measuring for the scale, whether that's large or small or what have you? And I think we run into trouble if I were to take that scale piece and go have conversation with David when he began to count the people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What happened for me with respect to New Life is when we reached a certain number, I stopped counting. Not because it became so much more, because it did not. We had some back and forwards. That's what the book is all about. But I purposely said, let me change what I'm measuring. Let me find other metrics of growth other than numerical, though that is important. Let me look at how well are we discipling? How many souls are being saved and how many not just how many, as we say in the industry, butts and seats, and how many views do we have? I think it's what are we measuring?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Let's think through what we measure. But before we do that, I want to know more about your own journey. You are a pastor. Are you the founding pastor of New Life in Christ? Tell us about how you got started in ministry and about the early stages of your church.
The early stages of our church, I'm a retired Air Force chaplain. There is a Air Force base in the same community. And I fought tooth and nail not to go to the Midwest. Didn't want to be within all the corn. I'm an East Coast kind of guy or something else, you know, and when you're in the military, you travel, you move here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. And it's kind of like when you're in the military, it's like God. They give you orders and you do it.
You know, so, like God, Lord have mercy.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, we ended up there and I decided to retire there. So we took 30 people who were, all of them weren't consistent, and planted a church, and the Lord breathed on it. God gets all the glory. I know who he was working with, so he gets all the glory.
Prior to your starting the church, did you always think that you would be in some element of vocational ministry, either as a chaplain or a pastor, or were there other dreams when you were younger?
No, that is, here's the thing, with respect to my journey and my story. I gave my life to Christ at age 12. I started preaching at 13 in the 8th grade. And I always knew that, one, I wanted to be a chaplain based on conversation I had with some of my older brothers who were in the military, came home, said, Jeff, you're a preacher. You should be a chaplain. It stuck. In my earliest teen years, I always said, I'm going to pastor a large church. I'm just telling that was the focus. And incidentally, you know, I'm actually right now visiting my hometown. And I was with some classmates and basketball team members with dinner last night. And they all referred to the fact, I won't tell you my nickname.
Now you have piqued our curiosity.
And they said, you always knew what you wanted to do. Bishop, you always knew it, what you wanted to do. And so from that to fast forward, it was just a matter of me constantly moving toward what I believe God had called me to do. And I'm doing what I believe he has called me to do.
First of all, preaching at 13 is not an uncommon thing in Baptist churches, especially during a time where it was like, oh, you ready to preach? Okay, next week, let's do this.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. Talk more about that experience.
I'm not Baptist.
Okay.
I am Pentecostal, holiness.
You mean other denominations put up children preachers too?
Absolutely. And we're known. We are famous for it as well.
That's great.
I remember so well when I told my pastor that I felt called. He literally said, "We will set up your trial sermon." You know, trial sermon.
Yeah, it was trial.
And my mother, I later found out that my mother went to him and said, "Wait, hold on, he's not ready."
Wow.
And I preached my initial sermon on my father's birthday.
Wow.
May the 13th.
So when you were younger and you had this vision of being a chaplain and of what you recalled as wanting to pastor a large church, was there something about the size of the ministry that was appealing, or did you how did you get to a large church? Because often when I hear younger preachers in particular talk about what they want to do, it's always, I want to preach to millions. I want to have a large church. What was that significance for you in your sense of calling?
I wanted to make a difference. When I looked at ministry, my father was a pastor, he's a bishop, was with the Lord, both he and my mom. And he had denominational positions. And I remember wanting to have influence and make changes of what I saw. I saw a very traditional, you can't play basketball, you can't wear pants if you're a woman, the whole list. And I thought, that doesn't make sense to me. And so it wasn't just the fact, oh, just let me have a whole lot of people. For me, it was let me influence a lot of people into what I believe God was calling us to and not what I was seeing.
The learning how to lead doesn't have to stop with this podcast. You can go to iLeadAcademy.net and learn how to lead in your home, your business, your career. Learn how to lead in the church, your community, in all the pursuits that you have in your heart to reach your destiny. This podcast is just the beginning. Go to iLeadAcademy.net and keep the learning going.
That's good. And I'm aware that sometimes we can conflate growth and scale. When I think about the context of the church, it seems like growth is the numbers, like you said, the butts and seats. It is a growth of just how big the congregation is, how much money you're bringing in. Scale seems to be the ability to do a multi-site church, to plant churches in other areas. In your early years, when you were thinking as a younger version of you, I want to pastor a large church. Did you at that time think, I want to grow a church? I want to start with my 30 people who may or may not be consistent, and I want to grow that to 30,000. Or were you thinking, I want to be a part of a large church that's already big and it gives me a chance to have greater impact? And maybe you didn't know at that age, and that's fine. But I was just curious, did you think that you would arrive in a space of it being large? Or did you think you were going to be the one to grow it? Because those feel like different desires.
Wanted to walk into something that was already large because that was the context that I was being formed in. My spiritual formation was happening in that way. As I got older, I remember the tug of war within myself that was when I was a chaplain, in fact, when I had in my mind, I'm going to go back, I'm going to return to my denomination, I'm going to help my dad, I'm going to position myself to get one of the larger churches and so on and so forth. But I remember the tug of war within myself that didn't no longer feel right for me. Like a seashell, I needed to crawl back on the shore, get out of that shell, and find a larger one of how I saw myself.
When you think of this transition, so you feel called to ministry, you want to do something big, but then you're pulled into military, which is arguably ministry almost on a micro scale. You're doing life on life ministry. You may have a service of some type. How did you feel moving into chaplaincy? Did you feel like this is big impact, or did you struggle in any way?
No struggle, because that's what I wanted to do. I was, like I said earlier, my brothers had an influence with me talking about being a chaplain, and it stuck. It just connected. And I say to this day, it's the second best job in all of the world. The first is what I do now.
Wow.
It is absolutely being a chaplain in the Air Force. I woke up every day with stars in my eyes. Yeah.
Wow. What do you mean by that? You woke up every day with stars in your eyes.
This is what I dreamed.
Mm-hmm.
To have that cross on my chest, to wear the cloth of my country, and to walk around the base and then provide a safe place for people to come and talk about their problems, and in some small way try to nudge them to the solutions. That's what I mean by stars. That was a dream come true.
And how long were you serving as a chaplain?
21 and a half years.
Wow. What were some of, as you think about those 21 and a half years, what were some of the moments that you felt were moments that defined you in your understanding of what it meant to be called to lead?
The first 9 years, I was what we call a line officer. I was not in the career field of a chaplain. I entered in as an air weapons controller. An air weapons controller is the person, if you remember Maverick, the movie, you remember them talking and saying, oh, the bandit is here, the bogey is there. There's a person that tells them that. That was my job. It's a very intense job. And that's what I did for 9 years. And then I switched over when I finished my MDiv and so on and so forth. Fast forward, I remember when I was gone to a leadership continuing education in the Air Force. We call it Squadron Officer School. It's a professional development part. And I remember the question. It was a pre-test assessment. It asked the question, did I feel called to be an Air Force officer?
Mm.
And I wrestled with answering that because I did not feel called to be that Air Force officer. I felt called to be a chaplain.
Mm.
And I stayed on that question because I didn't want to answer it wrong. That really drove home to me. Another part where I really felt a sense of gravity about my call, if that's the question, was like in my book, I talk about the challenges. And I came to understand that I truly was called, that the problems and the pressure was such that I should really, to keep my mind, I should really walk away. And it just like crystallized that I was built for this.
And what crystallized it sounds like was when you were forced to reconcile your calling in the midst of the challenges. Because it sounds like the challenges were enough to make you want to walk away, but there was a different sense of calling that made you say, no, I'm going to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
That see it through. My mother would say, let's run on and see what the end's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That moment of definition of a willingness to stay with your calling in the midst of challenges. How did that shape you for the calling to pastor in retirement?
Those moments that I was reflecting on then came as a result while, in the flow in the midst of planting and growing the church. When I was making a transition from line officer, which is kind of like a support officer in that particular career field, though I absolutely despised and hated with every fiber of my body, no joke. Every day I woke up hating that job, what I was doing.
Mm.
But it was the road that would lead me to where I wanted to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've always been kind of a guy that was a strategic thinker in terms of things. So they said, you got to get your seminary done so we can switch you to being the chaplain you want to be, which is completely unheard of. There's only third person in Air Force history that had ever done that.
Wow.
And without a break of service, I should say. And so when I came to that point and they gave me an assignment to take me away from the seminary that I was going to, I was in Hampton, Virginia, stationed at Langley Air Force Base. I was an air weapons controller at a unit there to control the 1st TAC Fighter Wing, which is the number 1 fighter wing in the Air Force. And so they says, okay, we're going to send you to Germany to be director of operations of a unit. That was my ticket. I was going to do well. I said, I'm not going to go. I'm going to finish seminary. I remember well what my wife said. She said, you're going to get out. We have a child. We have a mortgage. We have a house. We have a car payment. How are we going to live? How are we going to? I said, I'm going to get out. That was a seminal moment for me. I said, because I believe that that's what he's called me and I will just get out. And I didn't have to. That decision was pivotal for me because when I made that decision, I remember the church I was attending at the time, there was an evangelist prophet that came through. And he told everybody, said, if you're in the situation, I want you to get a piece of paper and write the word Rehoboth on it. And it is the story of Abraham and his wells and everything. God will make room for you. I did it and I put it on my desk. And there was no break in service.
Yeah.
And that affirmed the fact that I was called for this. I was built for this, and God was making room for me.
Amen. And that room that God was making for you led to you literally beginning this process of planting a church. So talk to us about this process of planting a church, which is undoubtedly small at the start, and seeing it grow. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because, again, I often hear from preachers, ministers, and leaders that bigger is always better. And they get frustrated when it doesn't grow fast. They start to doubt themselves and their sense of calling when it doesn't manifest itself into the vision that they had. You know, I imagined I would be preaching before hundreds of thousands and my church doesn't seem to want to grow. Talk to us about the mindset that you had when you first started the church and it was smaller.
Well, my story is a little different. I will affirm what you just said about most pastors, because the answer to that question is all of the above.
In what way?
You know, all of those things that we feel and think and say to ourselves and to others.
That's true.
But because I had a worship service on the base, and when I started, many of those came. And so though it was a core of 30, and it was that because there could not be conflict of interest, I could not associate or tell them to come. I had to get out and then start. Well, when I did that and God did what it is, it was very easy for me to know that this is what God had called, but to give God all the credit. Because you might have missed it earlier, because I know what God is working with.
You know more than anybody else knows.
I know more than anybody else what God and who He's working with.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to say, this is all you, God. This is all you.
This is only a snippet of what you can get when it comes down to learning how to lead yourself, others, build teams, solve problems. This is just a piece of the pie. Right after this podcast, go to iLeadAcademy.net and get more teaching like this. In fact, you can register for the courses and get certified in how to lead, solve problems, lead yourself, and build teams.
So when you started with that core foundation of about 30, when did you start to see growth happening for your congregation?
It was immediate.
Wow.
It was immediate because on the day that we had our initial service was 800 people in the initial service. And I announced that day that in 18 months we were going to build a church. And in 18 months we built a church.
Wow.
Crazy faith, or just crazy. They all come together.
Yeah. That is true.
You know, and so we walked in that. And in my book, I talk about the difficulty it is, and I would not encourage anybody to try to build a building and build people at the same time. That's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, my worship pastor, my executive pastor, and my youth pastor all left in the midst of that and started their own churches. And in the midst of that, after we built a church and we were expanding, the bank pulled out and left us with an incomplete expansion. So when I talk about this whole piece about leading through storms, it's about knowing that you need to be prepared for those types of storms and being able to keep your mind, your mental health in the middle of that.
Absolutely. And one of the things you said at the start of our conversation was, at a certain point, you just stopped tracking numbers and you wanted to measure something different. At what point did that happen when you decided I'm going to start measuring something different?
When things exploded?
Hmm.
No, when things imploded.
Hmm.
Doing all of those things that I just described.
Wow.
That caused me to begin to be reflective.
Mm-hmm.
What are you in this for?
Hmm.
The numbers aren't where they were. In fact, they are in reverse.
Yes.
What are you in this for?
Yes. Yes.
Why are you in this? And you got to have those conversations with yourself. So that's why you were in this, because, it was all gravy and it was wonderful and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And now that it is not, and things are going the opposite direction. So now, where is the timber of the man?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's when I began to say, this is about more than that.
Yes, that's right. And I'm so glad that you named that, because I think this is and has been the reality for many churches for the past 5-6 years. Post 2020, at least the research is showing us church attendance, physical church attendance, has not been rising. It's been declining. Even the most popular places, while they may be, reaching peak numbers online, everyone is experiencing, by and large, some type of decrease. How did you reconcile the numbers going backwards with this vision that you had when you were younger? I'm going to make major impact before a big crowd.
I got to bring in my kids, my adult children who are in ministry. They're millennial and Gen Z. And they help, both are seminary graduates. And we engage in ministry conversations. In fact, they have to say, Dad, turn it off. We're home now. Stop.
Let's talk about non-church stuff. Yeah.
Can we talk about something else? But I treat them like colleagues.
Wow.
And my son-in-law as well. And listening to them caused me to adjust what I was measuring. I'm a boomer.
Yeah.
Boomer, boom, big.
Yes. And you grew up in a time when everything was exploding. The Industrial Revolution changed everything. Post-war life changed everything. The 60s was all about growth. I mean, Crystal Cathedral all the beginnings of large things were just starting.
Exactly. And I think what helped me to adjust to how God is still growing big after the pandemic is relational growth and a more deliberate growth.
Yes.
And still, numbers are still important. I don't want to get away from that.
Yeah.
Jesus counted, so should I. But that's what helped me. And being able to do that and still run after growth numerically was good, that I did not feel defeated. Their prism helped me.
Yeah. And for you, their prism is not one of just numeric growth. What other factors are in the millennial Gen Z generation that are helping you to see a different manner of measuring?
Developing. And wanting to be developed. And that one-on-one type of developing and that kind of piece. Because in my mind, go get a book. You want to be developed? There's several books out here, and go get a class.
I wrote one.
Yeah, I wrote one. Why not try that?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Go to a class, take a course, get a degree.
Yeah.
Their development is through this lens of connecting and being in relationship.
Yeah, that's so good. When you think about the element of your generation growing, I found my dad was a pastor, and I remember my dad never pastored large congregations. I'd say, at its height, the church that he pastored was probably around 300 or so people, there was always a drive to want more. But I also learned from him the delicate dance between seeing growth as something that's distant from you and seeing growth as almost a part of you. If the church grows, I'm doing a good job. If the church is not growing, I'm failing. How do you navigate that between the seasons of growth in your church when things are exploding and the seasons when things are imploding? How do you navigate your own view of yourself when things are up and down?
My executive coach helps me in that. And, first, I do look through the prism of my own life. And then I have to also look at context and the seasons of a church, those kinds of things. My daughter, who is the pastor for pastoral ministries, she really emphasizes a lot about multi-generation because, we're like, if you don't have 80,000 millennials, then your church is no good.
That's right. Or at least 80,000 followers.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely no good. You're trash. You should just stop what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And she emphasized this thing about multi-generational.
Yeah.
And so that helped me as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in what way? How did the multi-generational part help you?
To see growth on both ends and being okay with it being on both ends. Now, both ends in the 50-year-olds and the 60-year-olds and the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings. And also knowing, too, that those things, you really have to grab a hold of what that looks like and be intentional about it. When I look in my book about those pieces and I see those seasonal types of things, then it helps me to know that, a church is going to be 10 to 15 years plus or minus my age.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah, it's going to be 10 to 15 years plus or minus my age. And that means that I have to be intentional about next gen and developing next gen.
The learning how to lead doesn't have to stop with this podcast. You can go to iLeadAcademy.net and learn how to lead in your home, your business, your career. Learn how to lead in the church, your community, in all the pursuits that you have in your heart to reach your destiny. This podcast is just the beginning. Go to iLeadAcademy.net and keep the learning going.
And just by the numbers alone, boomers were a larger generation than younger generations. And even the type of impact that you have, the numbers may not be the same. How are you coaching your children and your staff through what might be the ebb and flow of attendance or money or just growth and scale? How are you helping them to adapt?
I think it's kind of like when I go back again to my book. First, you got to be prepared. Storms are inevitable. Preparation is intentional. And you've got to be looking ahead and strategically and knowing, and how do I prepare? What I have done at my church is I have pulled together a focus group. And this focus group of millennials and Gen Xers, I've said to them very openly, it's about 15 of them, and I said, look, you are going to be the senior leadership of the church. Bishop is going to be out. You're going to be the senior leadership of the church. I want you to walk with me. I want you to walk with those that are around. I want you to do this because this is where it is and this is where we're going.
And how did they respond to that?
Oh, they embraced it. And I said, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to try to come on your side, because I'm kind of a guy that, okay, we decide this, now let's do A, B, C, D, and E. but you are these folk that we got to hang out. We got to get to know each other. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we got to
Yep.
go have coffee 80
Yes.
times. So I said, we'll go have coffee 40 times.
Nice. That's good compromise. They want to follow you around the grocery store and, with the phone, just watch you get in the car and watch you get out of the car. That's intimacy.
We'll do
Yeah.
that. We'll do that. And then
Yeah.
we'll do some other stuff too. I'll make
That's good.
you're going to come in by the end of the year. It literally, this is happening as I speak.
What a
And I
blessing.
said, by the end of the year, you're going to come in the boardroom. You're going to sit and watch us make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to look at the people, and I'm going to assign you different ones that are in these seats, and they're going to walk with you because you're going to switch seats.
Wow. That is what it looks like then, to have that intentionality on building up the younger generation and preparing them for ministry, which will include the storms, and it will include, crucifying what they thought was supposed to happen and how big they thought they were going to get. So if you could imagine a kind of another focus group, imagine this is a focus group of, young to mid-career pastors, and they are all experiencing growth. Let's just say they've been in ministry 5 to 10 years, and their churches are just growing. Every Sunday, there's an altar call and 30 people join. What do you say to them to keep them grounded?
Read my book.
Read my book. That's right.
I cannot. It sounds trite and it sounds self-serving. Read my book. Storms will come. If you are doing the work of the Lord, you are going to come up against some rough patches. Keon Henderson is a good buddy of mine. They had a hurricane, it hit their church and all of that. I text him and I said, every church is going to have storms. And now you're about to find out the real church that you have. It's going to happen. And and we don't want to put this, you talked about attendance, you talked about growth. Yes, there are. And I'm so proud of them. I see some of them that are just blowing up and doing great things, not mad, not just, not anything about that. I'll call another name, Mark Moore. And he was asking, hey, we're doing this and that. So I said, here is I'm planning into this because I see you really doing great stuff. And just various things, but get ready. It's not shade. It's not haterade. It's the elders of the village saying, prepare yourself, prepare your people. Because here is where you find yourself. Pressure has a way of causing you to know who you are, and it lets you know who's with you. Come here, Peter, have a sit down and have conversation. Because when we were blowing up, Peter, you said you were never going to leave me.
That's right. That's right.
And when it blew up, Peter, you were cussing at me. And, so then those things help make the church.
Yes. And they make the leader as well.
And they make the leader.
Yeah.
They make the leader.
Yeah. So the message to those who are experiencing growth is brace yourself for the storm. Don't get comfortable in places of growth. If you were to have a conversation with a different group, let's play out that this group is same amount of tenure, maybe 5 to 10 years in ministry. Maybe there's a mix of leaders. Maybe it's pastors and leaders. Their ministry is not growing. It seems like it's just a small thing. They had grandiose visions for massive growth in scale and impact, but they are only having that faithful, smaller group. What would you say to them?
First thing I'd say, and in fact, I'm going to be doing a presentation next month to a denomination that I am connected to, I grew up out of. And the denomination is no shade, is a numerical fact, is in decline.
Yeah. Almost all denominations are.
Yeah. Yeah. In decline.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that I'm going to present to them is I'm going to present, if I can find it, a mirror, little small mirror to put on my presentation. The first place you look is yourself. Stop looking at everybody else. Stop looking at online. Stop looking who's blowing up and all of that. Just stop looking at. First place you look, are you growing? Are you growing? Another question is, do you really want to see people saved? What does Matthew 28 mean to you? Is your discouragement, is all of this because you're not growing, or is it because people are not getting saved? It's two different things.
That's a great question. That's right. Two different things.
It's two different things.
Yeah.
Are you bothered because people are not coming to know the Lord? Or are you bothered because there are not enough people to preach to?
Yeah.
Because that's going to drive a lot.
Yes.
So when you answer that question honestly, you don't have to tell everybody the answers right now.
Yeah.
But when you answer that question honestly, then start looking at systems
Yes.
or the lack thereof.
Yes.
That are attached to a deep desire to see people get saved.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where I would say.
That's so important, because when you really look at the motive behind your desire to scale or grow your ministry, you have to come to grips with the source. Is this coming from me because I just want a whole lot and a large space? Or is it coming from the Lord who drives us, as you said in that Matthew 28, to go into all nations and to share and to speak and to baptize and to know that he's with us? That's powerful. As we close out, for those who may be listening, and maybe some are wrestling with scale because they're frustrated that they're not growing fast enough, as we talked about. Maybe some are wrestling with scale because they feel like maybe you don't have to scale. Maybe you don't need to grow. Maybe there's no desire. What do you want to share with those who may be listening as they think about their own paths and their relationship with God and God's calling?
How do you lead people through the storms of ministry and keep yourself sane? How do you do that? And I think there's more than one answer. One, have a healthy sense of who you are, the real you. You know, there's some commercial that comes on that says the real. Well, who's the real you? And then there flows the strength to make it with Christ, or the need to adjust why you're doing what you're doing, the motives. Because at the end of the day, God is going to get at who he's working with before he fires you. And as a pastor, he can fire you and still make you come to work.
That's right. Yeah. But we thank God for, even in those cases, the mercy that is promised to be new every morning, for the grace that is more than sufficient, and for the deep abiding love that invites us to keep coming back no matter how much or how little we are growing with him.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things, and if I could say this, and then I'm sure we have to close, one of the things that I highlight, I think, in the book is the multiplicity of things that will come at you in ministry.
Yeah.
From staff or high profile leaders leaving, to banks pulling out, to your own mental health instability, and candor to deal with that. I think that those are things that that we have to really deal with in ministry and be transparent about.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 C's to go along with that. Find you a good counselor and remember the comforter.
Amen. And pray your counselor knows the comforter as well.
Well, don't get him. Don't hire him or her.
That's right. That's right. Oh, Bishop Dudley, thank you so much for your wisdom and for your insights and for sharing so openly about your experiences. I will remember your sense of calling and just the importance of remembering why you're called, not because of the outcomes of growth or scale, but because of this deep, abiding sense that God is with you even in the storms.
Yeah, he's responsible for the outcome. You're not.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Well, for listeners who want to keep up with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is on all social media platforms is Bishop Dudley, PhD, at Bishop Dudley, PhD. And I literally have my book here.
You have it!
Absolutely.
Yay! That's amazing. Yeah. Well, we want to encourage everyone to go to Amazon or wherever they buy their books to pick up Bishop Dudley's book, Leading Through the Storms. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you. And yes, please go get it. And when you buy it on Amazon, then do a, what is the word that I'm looking
for?
A review. And give me 5 stars. If you're not going to give 5 stars, don't bother.
Don't bother. Just leave your negativity to yourself.
Don't bother.
Oh, thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
If you want more teaching like this to increase your ability to lead, to have influence, to make a difference, solve problems, build teams, and know who you are as a leader, then go to iLeadAcademy.net and get even more teaching like this.